dressed up for you today. Actually, the truth is at 6:45 this morning, that large venti spilled on the table in front of me and on my quarter zip pullover. No, well, I pulled out last night dinner jacket, but yesterday's, I think I'm a highly successful spiller of things on my clothing. Can I have one of those? Thank you. I spilled it on my notebook and meeting materials too. Like it. What are you reading this year? I am reading The Demon of Unrest. Demon of Unrest by Eric Larson. I've read a couple of his books. I did not. My wife did. I read Splendid and the Vile, The Splendid and the Vile, which is Winston Churchill. What really? What's this one? The lead up to Fort Sumter, and it goes through the election. Like, are we off the record here for now? I don't want to get in trouble over election things. Amazing chapter about the certification of the 1860 election into 1861. Like, you're reading paragraphs from almost current events. It's just fascinating. Okay, including references to the vice president certifying the election. And he was an opponent in the election. And a lot of questions there. So welcome to Thursday. Usually this is Friday, so I'm adjusting my calendar, for 20 plus years that I've been around here. We finish on Friday afternoon. The last 8 years, -2, so I guess 6 years I've been the one speaking. Other times I've been like staff watching. One of our functions on this final day is we have a general business session, which is our voting session. You have a set of proposals distributed to you that were voted on, all approved unanimously today. I can think back to having 32 of these proposals to change conference bylaws, and these are fairly straightforward. So just quickly, if you look at the intent for each, so changing our bowl game revenue distribution, we're being fully transparent here with you. We show you dollar figures. We have to make an adjustment around the college football playoff competition. Second one, you can see eliminates divisions. The fact that's happening is not a surprise. So it's more of a formality at this point. That was number 2, right? Number 4 is on the back, and you're like, wow, these people can't count. There was a 3 on changing a bylaw that was withdrawn. We are able to count. 4 is just clarifying responsibility for our class attendance policy that governs our athletics departments. And then proposal 5 is a modification to hiring practices, kind of a background check requirement, communication requirement on coaching hires. So all of those have been approved. We also today, at the athletics director's level, they spent time with John McDade, our coordinator of officials. If you're with us in Dallas at Media Days, that's our next gathering. John will be making a full presentation to you there, talk through the postseason bowl process. It is just a little bit different because of the additional opportunity for teams to participate in the college football playoff. If you look back over time, that 12-team field allows us to fill out our contract bowls. So you start with Citrus Bowl, and given the way the New Year's 6 bowls worked, you have consistently in the past populated New Year's 6 bowls with teams that generally would have been in the 12-team playoff, thereby allowing us to populate Citrus, Outback, well, not Outback, but ReliaQuest. I shouldn't have even started the rest of them in order. So we went through that process. We did have a discussion with our women's basketball coaches, our senior women administrators, and our athletics directors about the onset or creation of an NCAA women's basketball performance fund. I did not have an update today, but my sense is that creation is something we support and support sooner rather than later, and we'll communicate that through you today and more directly through the formal feedback process. Tiffany, is that a fair characterization. Yep. And then we did talk today. Our athletics directors had their first opportunity to discuss the student athlete availability reporting um, memorandum and draft policy that was created, kind of a structure. We'll continue advancing that conversation. I've advised the presidents and chancellors that that dialogue is taking place. I did not provide the presidents and chancellors with the briefing document and did not put that on their agenda given all that they had. We then, I'm kind of hopping around on the day, so this is not chronological. This is orderly in my mind somehow. We did have a joint session of athletics directors and presidents. That's the only time they gathered together. We talked about football scheduling. I'll be happy to come back to that if you'd like. We talked about availability reporting, and we talked about the path forward for college athletics and the formation of some working groups as we work through the settlement, noting that I've said a couple of days in a row it's not a done deal, but how do we, for instance, have a group looking at conference rules that may need to be adopted or may need to be may need to be removed or implemented in light of this settlement. A group to look more deeply at our federal legislative efforts. A group on oversight of the settlement and governance of the settlement itself. And then we've got some opportunity to look at this distribution model that will come from the plaintiffs for back damages and learn from that. And we'll then create a group off of that to figure out what the future looks like under that model. The athletics directors have roster structures. They are that working group, so we did have a discussion. I think the athletics directors have had the debates all week. Discussion between our presidents, chancellors, and athletics directors. We think it's something that needs to move expeditiously given the timing of settlement terms, but we also need to be thoughtful in understanding the breadth of implications for our athletics department. That's it. So I'll stop, see what you have for me. A discussion, not a decision, was what I said earlier, so we're continuing in that discussion. We haven't set a vote for implementation. This was the first opportunity to kind of test drive the idea with some specificity among our coaches. My sense from looking at all of you on Twitter was our coaches did not state great opposition. I think there was curiosity and a healthy exchange about the idea. So I've got to learn a little bit from the athletics directors meeting. I have to inform the presidents, and we'll figure out the go-forward basis. There are some structural things. You know, you have to figure out reporting systems, oversight systems. We have to continue to provide education about what it may mean practically, because it's one thing to hear it and read it, and we have to continue to provide examples. So there's more work to be done. Whether or not that's implemented for this fall is an open-ended question.
Do you have enough information to know whether you would prefer the NFL type model where it's days out with the information, or more what the Big Ten did last year, which is basically only 2 hours before kickoff?
We're going to prefer the SEC model, and that is a product of learning from all of the models that exist. We play in different times in different sports, so it would be yeah, we got a lot on our shoulders. A lot on our shoulders. We got softball game going on right now. I don't know if anybody's checking the score. There you go. That's good. Won a golf national championship last night. The NFL doesn't win golf national championships, nor does the NBA. Those are things that are forgotten by those who advance the pro model. But in all seriousness, we've used learning from kind of all of those methodologies to inform what I think is an advance, and then a little bit of ongoing update expectation. But what I haven't had the benefit of because of my time in the president's meeting room is to see what may have filtered back to create some adjustments. That's why I want to be careful with specifics.
I believe has a policy. Do any other SEC schools in football have
I think LSU and Bryant had one last year, did they not? Yeah.
So two very NFL.
Greg, in addition to the working groups that you mentioned, what are the next steps moving forward as you try to figure out more
Um,
public people
well,
are.
I saw today, so I think Steve Berkowitz tweeted about the judge's decision to stay for, I think, max of 45 days. So I have to learn what that means practically, what we have to complete. So the attention goes rapidly to, as I understand, long form discussion, so a long form agreement discussion. Um, what what inputs needed from conferences there? I think I don't have enough information to know, but that's the focus. And then the outcome of that work helps guide future decision making. So as I indicated, this is a process. A term sheet was announced, an agreement was announced a week ago. The immediate reaction is we all want answers. That's just not the luxury we have. So this legal process will have to play out. Where we can define answers during the interim, I think we will and should. But that doesn't mean we can provide every answer within that 45-day period, for example.
How beneficial was this week just from communicating, talking, getting new ideas?
I think there are maybe three gatherings in the last month that were really important for our league. One is a meeting of our presidents and chancellors in person in Birmingham on May 15th, especially at a busy time with end of semester commencements. Some have travel. And that helped us advance through just the discussion and the depth of concerns and issues and the need to understand. And this was in advance of agreeing to settlement terms. So I would rank that as a critically important meeting. This week we benefited in the president's and chancellor's room from having had that meeting. So we went to another level of depth and have identified the likely need for more in-person meetings this summer. The third meeting was our athletics directors meeting 3 weeks ago, where those who are going to have to implement some of this change spent the better part of 3 days thinking through and sharing ideas and processing. That made this week so much better than it would have been. So much better than it would have been. And I think we walk out of here with an understanding that we're heading to a new chapter. We're going to have to manage transition, but fully prepared and committed across the board at the athletic director, president, chancellor level to make that to take a leadership role in that change.
Greg, on conference football scheduling, I know you talked about it a little bit yesterday, but what do you see as the biggest hurdle or thing that has to be overcome to get that to 9 games in 2020?
I don't reduce it to a biggest hurdle, and I mean that respectfully. We talked a little bit about this maybe 2 days ago because I observed what really happened is it's not a primary agenda item like it has been. Last year that was like the item. I think last year we were here and we were talking about 8 games, and there was 2 weeks of opining about how could they stay at 8 games, and then we released the 8 games for everybody. And it's like, man, look at those great games that are in their 8-game schedule. So we made that decision for 25. What was back in March, I think. The factors are we have an opportunity to learn from CFP selection this fall. That learning from CFP selection, I just kind of predicted the placement of teams that could still happen in the same order to which we're accustomed under the New Year's Six. But we have 2 more teams involved in the league. And so we have the CFP learning, we have the bowl access learning. Those are 2 important data points that have been shared repeatedly with me. Work with our media partner. Where do games fit? Thinking through the flow, discussion about how you might format something different. We've gone through that before, given what we're facing. That's been on the side, so we would re-engage those. Those are all factors that would contribute to a decision.
When you say work with your media partner, how much of that conversation is about money?
There's always factors, and there's a lot more than money involved. We don't always do things despite what people cite for money.
Greg, OU Texas has always been, or not always, but often been 11 a.m. kickoffs.
We had a lot of talk. It was in a very short period of time of like 8 days, and then after about the interest of the two universities having that game at 10:30. So we've achieved that goal, and that opportunity can remain. Can't guarantee everything. Nothing's guaranteed in life, but um, yeah, that's a good thing, as I understand it. Although my Twitter feed was filled with negativity after the announcement. I went to Chris. I'm like, dude, you told me this was a good thing. He's like, yeah, it's a good thing. So,
Twitter's negative?
yeah.
Come on.
I did find like the 12th comment down was positive. Nobody called me names. That's progress.
There's some talk of basketball scheduling. Did you talk about
Yeah.
increasing men's and women's game, number of games?
I don't know from a women's standpoint. I think we've identified that over time post expansion. We remain at 16. I know because I saw the briefing memo on the 20 game schedule. So the coaches did have a conversation about what that might mean, not for this year, but what are the possibilities for the following season. That's not action. That's the right kind of preparation. And just like there's no one factor in this discussion about 8 or 9 game football schedule, there's no one factor in the men's basketball schedule, number of games, and the same for women's basketball schedule. We did bring in our scheduling consultants from HCI Consulting who help us understand the net, the strategic decisions around scheduling non-conference games. They were really effective at showing how some institutional scheduling philosophies in our league over the last few years, playing a tougher non-conference schedule, and in this circumstance, particularly men's basketball, put a team in a really healthy position come Selection Sunday. Those are important learnings. We also know that there are a number of conferences that have moved to 20 game schedules, and so we had some analysis about the reduction in the number of high quality, if you will, or quartile one type non-conference opponents. That's a factor for us to consider. We also wanted to hear from our coaches about their ease or their difficulty in scheduling those quality non-conference games and where the trends might be leading. So that was the conversation. It doesn't lead to a decision, but it sets the fact that that will be an ongoing dialogue as we head into the fall and look towards the 25-26 season in determining if change might be needed.
Chris Del Conte said yesterday that
Uh-oh.
he preferred NIL collectives be brought within university purview. Is that possibility kind of tough to see just without full knowledge of the case details and even what federal legislation, if it does comes, and where do you think athletic directors, presidents throughout the league stand on that issue as well?
Quite consistently, the perspective is that we'd like to see the communication to me is that they'd like to see collectives, moved away. I think there's a positive response to the opportunity in the settlement to bring name, image, and likeness activity in-house. We even heard from student athletes talking about, you don't really know who you're signing agreements with. Is that really healthy for us? Our student athletes even know of collectives that have announced their ending payments under agreements. And when you think about a healthier circumstance, I think that's what informs the perspective that Chris shared. And it's shared by most, if not all, of his colleagues, that they would like to see a change in that area.
Can you just put into perspective, I'm looking at this first adopter thing with the Bulls and the CSP money. So just to be clear, this is brand new money that each team gets for each round. As you advance, you continue to get more money. What's the significance of that for each team? Can you just kind of explain?
Our prep work has been about teams participating, not coming out of pocket in any way. And so you see adjustments up above that are substantial. Costs are going up, access to charter aircraft, distances. We have a bowl in Vegas. We don't know where first round games may be played. You could be cross country, and so rather than having to manage through those issues in real time, it is an allocation that an institution knows it can run from a budget standpoint. If it nets out from that, good for them. If it balances their budget, good for them as well. And that's really the way we've been preparing and have conducted ourselves for years. I do think we want to separate. So the bowl conversation probably started last August with our athletics directors about what might need to be adjusted for the amount they retain or the amount they receive for their expenses. That's really all it is. And it's not cheap to travel teams, and particularly when you don't know and you're doing it on a short time frame.
You're talking about expenses. It looks like there's also, I mean, I might be reading it wrong because I literally just looked at it, but it looks like you got $3 million just for qualifying
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
the first round.
Yeah,
And then you
yeah.
get
That's
additional
about-
if you have to travel.
Yep.
Okay, so,
I think that's right. Did I get that right? Yeah.
okay.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the 3.5. Yeah.
And also, if I can just jump on that side, so 3 million for the first round, an additional 3.5 million for the second round, or is it if you get?
Yeah, I think you read it as written.
Yeah, no.
Yep. Yeah. No, there's no tricks in there. Yeah.
And that's money from the conference.
Well, it comes to the conference from the CFP to the institutions.
So that's everybody, that's not just CFP, correct?
Everybody in the CFP.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's. I'm not sure that's what you.
This is your release.
Every bowl is in effect in that. So
Okay.
whatever you play in the ReliaQuest, you play in the Gator, depending on what the payout is, then you get that as a participant share plus a travel allowance. And also, just again to clarify, this is the SEC's decision.
Right.
Maybe what Dennis might have been alluding to is other conferences.
Yeah, that's why I was like for an
Yeah,
SEC
other
team.
conferences might
Yeah, this is our policy. I'm sorry. We've twisted each other up there.
I'm sorry, each school gets that 3 million or
The participating.
participating?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
It's driven
And
to
then
the
rest of
participant.
The CFP money that comes to SEC is part of the
Revenue sharing. Yep.
distribution.
That's right.
I see it says it goes to the commissioner here.
Yeah, that's not right. Nice try. Don't get that started. Yeah.
The announcement in February for the partnership between the SEC and the Big Ten, why was that important to put out there for everybody to know?
Everyone asked for transparency.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I picked up the phone on a Saturday evening and called Tony Petiti because I had spent a Monday in Houston in a CFP meeting where we failed to accomplish much, in my opinion. I stayed for the first half of the national championship game. First time I've ever left at halftime. You could understand why. I had an early flight the next morning on Southwest Airlines after all that weather came through and all the schedules were changed to go to Phoenix, where I then spent the better part of 2 days in NCAA meetings where he accomplished little. And so afterwards, traveling home, like, we have some really big problems. And it didn't seem to me that we were working to solve some of the medium problems, and we weren't even talking in some of those rooms about the really big issues. And I have thought for a long period of time that if the two conferences could agree that you could fulfill a leadership responsibility. Now we have to do that with people, and that was the genesis of the phone call to Tony. We had a couple of phone calls with presidents who form our executive committees just to talk about what's in front of us. And rather than continue to do that, and eventually somebody's going to find out, we took the responsibility to say, hey, we're trying to work together. We have some really pressing issues under the Joint Defense Privilege and Litigation. There are some, remember, Project Division 1 had been introduced, 6, 7 weeks before. We're going to be expected to weigh in on that concept, and we're working on federal legislative issues. And we need to have more conversation, not less. And it's informed by the line that really came to me at the end of the week. This is not like a lightning strike moment, but the realization you're not going to solve the big problems in big rooms filled with people, because the realities are so different across Division One. We're in a division, broadly, you would argue largely because of March and a men's basketball tournament that people seek to be a part of. I commented earlier that even when we've had ongoing litigation, institutions in Division Two and Division Three are choosing to pursue Division One status with all of this turmoil. So we must be doing something right. But you wouldn't put a lot of these universities and these conferences in the same room and say, go figure it out. So all of that was a part of the conversation. And, it's not, I want to be clear, it's not an alliance. It's, the ability for our leadership as presidents, chancellors, and athletics directors to work together through some of these important issues, and we hope draw people in as we work towards resolution of the challenges.
Greg, I remember you being frustrated when you were on the transformation committee about updating the council, or updating the NCAA council on something. No one raised their hand. Nothing written about it.
Yeah, that was last June, I think.
Right. How much of that
Exactly.
is what you?
You try. I'll be really specific with what I said to the presidents. There's times in the job when you're a bully, and times when you need to be a statesman. And I try not to be a bully, really. But that day was enormously frustrating. It was enormously frustrating for several reasons. One, the NCAA is a committee nomination process, which says that I, as a commissioner, can go invite Oklahoma and Texas to join. I can sign media deals with Disney, but I can't decide who's on the women's golf committee for my conference, who'd be the best representative. I think that illustrates part of the NCAA's problem. And so that day I raised the issue, and we argued about that for 40 minutes. That should have been a 5-minute conversation to say, you know what? Conferences have a responsibility to contribute to diversity, fulfill it. If you don't, we'll have a catch-all system. But you as a member have the responsibility to appoint qualified members to our committees. I don't know why that's difficult for my colleagues. We then had a presentation on work of an NIL working group, and the opportunity was offered for questions, and I decided to just wait and see what people had to say. Nobody said a word. Nobody said a word. And I jumped in and basically said, you have to be kidding me. So I was a jerk, okay? I was a jerk. And I try not to be a jerk all the time, or most of the time, but sometimes you have to be a jerk. That informs that January thought of, you are not going to solve the big problems we face in big rooms filled with people. That's an opinion. I think that's a shared opinion. And I think that moment illustrated it for me. Now, you go back to the transformation committee, and we were told, blue sky thinking, everything's on the table, right? And you've watched as what's happened at the NCAA level is, no, we can't do this with championship funding to make sure that our student athletes' regular season experience and their postseason experience is consistent. We can't do some hub air travel thing. I don't even know what that means. So on that one, my frustration is, don't ask me to co-chair something, and Julie was great to work with, if the game we're playing is you actually don't have the responsibility to introduce big picture thinking. And I could go through more issues that you just had to walk away from probably in April and realize you can get what you can get out of that, and there'll be limits. That's a lot more than you asked, but that's a very candid response. That ought to get some tweets going, shouldn't it?
Whatever comes out of this, there's going to be more leeway for what you would call leadership, I would think, right?
And responsibility.
Right.
Yeah, and again, that's why I was intentional to say, as it relates to the the Big Ten SEC advisory group, that's an acceptance of the responsibility for leadership. Now, it's hard in a time of turbulence and a time of change to just, navigate in a linear way, especially when you're in the midst of changing a model. You have external pressures like we do from litigators and legislators. But that's the responsibility that's present. And I've been on the other end of the competitive spectrum in Division I, the other end of the financial spectrum. A lot of complaining about how this backward-looking damages responsibility is shared. I had to live with that in the restricted earnings coach lawsuit in the late 90s. So I'm not unfamiliar with the differences. I can tell you when Roy Kramer retired, the search firm called me for my resume. And I remember where I was thinking, wow, I could be commissioner of the Southeastern Conference. It was 2002. That was such a naive thought that I could have at that point in my life and my career made a contribution to lead. Because I was here 13 years, and the first week I learned an enormous amount about the pressures and expectations back in November of 2002. And I think that has to be respected and recognized. I respect and recognize the pressures and expectations on the other end of the Division I spectrum, but those have to be recognized and respected at this end as well.
Given what you just laid out.
Yeah, there's a lot there, Pat.
There's a lot, yeah.
We're going to be here a while.
Is there enough still binding Division I together as a basketball tournament, enough to keep Division I together?
I don't know. Who in here wrote the nasty articles about me in the AQ comment? Did anybody write those?
Oh, that's Pat, I think.
Oh, was it? I mean, you tell me. Go back to the Transformation Committee. You go back to the Transformation Committee. We asked a question early on: what binds Division I together? And when you're in those groups, or you ask kind of broadly surveys, you receive a bunch of flowery language. It's supporting academic pursuits. Well, you can do that in Division III in a really great way. I think the folks at Emory or at Hamilton College would argue they can meet that expectation. We can give a great student-athlete experience. Again, I think probably Washington University would say that. I have friends at Wheaton College who have wonderful experiences. So what is it that creates the bind in Division I? And I think it does come down to March. Now, that's an opinion. It's not analytics-driven. Can it stay together? Yes. But I think there are pressures there that have to be recognized, and that's what I was attempting to communicate. And some of that is just as simple as at 68, when we assign 2 10 seeds to play each other, and then you have a North Carolina State that goes to the Final Four, you're looking at, well, we're putting 2 teams that could maybe make that same run and eliminating one of them up front, rather than playing 15 and 16 seeds. I think that's the kind of stress I was talking about. When you and I visited and I said, look, I don't want to make headlines, which, by the way, I learned something that day. Never say you want to make headlines and then say anything after it. So I may have just made headlines. But it made headlines about tournament expansion. I've never suggested a number. I just think, in my perspective, in the Transformation Committee working group on championships, in which I wasn't involved, said you need to look at having 25% of the membership able to access the championship. Well, that predicts growth. So we've allowed Division I to grow. We have conferences solving their membership problem by inviting non-Division I members in, but we haven't modified the bracket size. I think common sense says you have to dig into that. Now, there are competitive issues, there are calendar issues, there are economic issues. But I do think that March can be kept together. That doesn't mean it stays exactly the same. But just the articles written after my comment and the reaction show you how unique that experience is to our culture. And I mean that, I meant that then respectfully, and I mean that now respectfully. But we also have to recognize the differences that do exist within the group that pursue that brass ring of a tournament access opportunity. Ralph, you were holding that close. It was like, was it getting good, or?
Yes. Sure, I got it.
Especially
Oh, I didn't hear that. I was so focused. So focused. What else? I'm not in any hurry.
So when you retire the belt, are you going to frame it, or is
I don't
the belt
know.
going to-
It's laying on a table
Oh, is it really?
in my hotel room. Yeah, I don't know. It was given to me. Um, I've not been a great wearer of that belt until championships last year. So my championship tradition is green because nobody has green as a color. And believe it or not, even wearing this jacket, I was complimented on wearing Kentucky blue last night. And I just it's a nice blue sport coat. So you have to be careful about those things. So I wore it last year to a championship. I wore it several times to championships this year, and we have a library maybe in the conference office where we store some really cool artifacts. If you're ever in Birmingham by our office, maybe I'll put it on a shelf in the library.
I'm sorry, Greg, I do actually have one follow-up.
We don't need to apologize.
Big Ten, are there more meetings planned? I mean,
I don't have anything scheduled, but we will. Oh, there will be interactions. Yeah, we actually, it's just a busy time of year for folks. So I think we both have an interest in conversing about our end of year meetings that have taken place and what's happening around us.
how strict is the alignment? Do you really want the two conferences to come together and find
No,
mutual
the-
answers?
Well, there are two answers. One is, yeah, sure, to the extent that's possible, but we have legal sensitivities, so we're going to have to make independent decisions on a number of really key things. We can't solve every problem together. Otherwise, you reintroduce antitrust concerns, and so we're very attentive to having counsel involved. We also, as I said, have to draw people in, so it's not like two votes change the world. Certainly, two conferences agreeing on things in the right sort of way have influence.
And how much do you consider that, I'm sorry, that there are differences between
Oh,
conferences
yeah.
too, and when you start thinking about what that looks like, size of programs, and I know everybody has sponsored a lot of sports, but their programs tend to sponsor a few more. What those hurdles look like.
Maybe the way to ask that or to answer that is I have differences in a room of 16 here in one conference, and I would expect differences. I think that's what helps us learn. That's the reason that an advisory group makes sense, to collaborate and communicate. And maybe that shifts positions on our end, maybe that shifts positions on their end. Maybe we identify where we don't agree and why. And I think that can be helpful too.
When do you believe you guys will be able to open the doors, maybe draw more people, like you said, into what your discussions and the things you guys have come up with?
I don't answer deadline questions.
No runway, no plane.
When you said the athletic directors have the roster structures, does that mean there are numbers for each team, or are things?
Well, we've talked about numbers, and people have shared ideas, but there's nothing hardened. We've tried to learn what exists now and those sorts of things, but it's a work in progress.
Greg, Trev Alberts had maybe the most discussed quote of the week where he said we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem in college sports. Do you agree, disagree, and if so, where is the inefficiency?
I just gave a really long answer, so you're asking a question that would predict the long answer, and I don't know if I have that much wind left in the sails. I'm not an expert on institutional budgets either. I'll let our institutions speak for themselves on that. I don't disagree with Trev's observation, and he's not alone in that comment, even in our room. Others may not have said it publicly, but I took notes when it's been said over the last few meetings privately.
Greg, did you say yesterday that as
I don't know.
Title IX applies to the revenue sharing, the 22 million, 22% moving forward, you'll look to how the Title IX is applied to the back payments, to the 2.8 billion that's going?
No, that's first of all, it's 22%, so it's not a dollar figure. That's going forward. These are separate issues, and we are interested in learning how the plaintiff's attorneys position the backward-looking payments and what that means from the Title IX analysis that people may apply. I think that's a learning opportunity.
Greg, what is a long-form agreement in legal terms?
Long?
Right, is it
Yeah,
just
yeah, it's long.
yeah. I mean, is it just something standard that applies in antitrust cases, or just the next step?
You probably want to talk to antitrust people. I don't think there's anything standard about what I'm dealing with right now. If it was standard, I would pull out the book and we'd be at it in a different way. So we're in a process of building the bridge as we cross the river, and we're writing the manual with one of the hands as we do so.
Let's do one more question.
That's okay. Make it a good one.
Anybody else?
You have great perspective, having seen it from all sides. How do you characterize this time right now in college athletics?
The simple, I'll go back to one of my predecessors. So you go back to 2015. It's kind of where I started this week when I said this is the end of year 9 and the beginning of year 10. And Roy Kramer stood up at a gathering of current and former SEC athletics directors, all who were there to celebrate Mike Sly's retirement. And he went through 5 toasts, and it was for athletics directors who helped build the conference who were no longer with us. There were a set of retired athletic directors there. He honored them. Our current athletic directors, he toasted me. And I actually have the recording on my phone. And he said to our athletics directors, you know, Greg's going to need your support because he's going to have to navigate uncharted waters. That dude nailed it. So we are navigating uncharted waters. And that's okay. I mean, that's part of the excitement of leadership, but it's also part of the pressure that exists. And back to this week, I think the work that we've done through the month of May positioned us for very important, very meaningful, very effective dialogue. Some decisions, but a lot of direction. And that's what you need when you're navigating uncharted waters. I tied that together pretty well, didn't I?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Had
Be
your
well.
phone for over a decade.
What's that?
Had your phone
Yeah.
for over a decade.
Well,
I have 2 teenage daughters.